Good afternoon. My name is Daryl Hondorp. I'm a fishery research biologist with the U.S. Geological Survey Great Lakes Science Center in Ann Arbor, Michigan. This afternoon, I'd like to provide a brief overview of acoustic telemetry projects currently underway in the Lake Michigan Basin. My focus will be on those projects currently affiliated with the Great Lakes Acoustic Telemetry Observation System, or GLOTOS. GLOTOS is a network of researchers who work collaboratively using acoustic telemetry to understand fish behavior in relation to Great Lakes ecology and provide information useful to fish managers in their decision making. Projects mentioned during this presentation already have or will soon have project home pages on the GLOTOS website. So for more information on any of these projects, one good place to go to is the GLOTOS webpage. Currently, 8 ongoing projects are maintaining acoustic receivers in Lake Michigan, and the locations of these receivers are shown in the map to the left. You'll note that the receiver distributions are highly focused in Green Bay and in the northeast end of the main lake. At least 2 new studies will be deploying acoustic receivers in tributaries to the southern end of the lake in 2022. The first group of projects I'll describe are all occurring in Green Bay. The investigators involved in these projects and the cooperating agencies are shown on this slide. For additional information on any project, any Green Bay project, please contact Dan Iserman. 3 telemetry projects are currently underway in Green Bay, and all are leveraging a 78 receiver grid covering the entirety of the bay. Additional receivers are located in several tributaries and in Sturgeon Bay. 54 of the open water receiver stations are also outfitted with data sondes monitoring dissolved oxygen and temperature. The first Green Bay project is focused on walleye. Tagging in this project was completed during 2017 and 2018, and data collection is largely complete. Results of analysis to date suggest that walleye movements in the bay have important implications for interjurisdictional management. And there's interest in tagging additional walleye in northern Green Bay, which additional data sources suggest are crossing important management boundaries. The second Green Bay project is focused on Lake Whitefish. This large project is progressed in 3 phases. Phase 1, which was conducted in 2017 and 2018, is now complete. And in this portion of the project, fish were tagged and released in the Fox, Menominee rivers, Big Bay, Denok, and in Lake Michigan adjacent to the Door Peninsula. Phase 2 of the project was conducted in 2020 and 2021 and focused on and included tagging of fish that underwent spawning runs in the Menominee, Fox, Peshtigo, and Akano rivers. Phase 3 of the project is targeted for 2022 through 2024. Here, an additional 300 lake whitefish will be tagged outside of the spawning spring and winter fishery seasons. The final Green Bay project is focused on smallmouth bass movements and is scheduled to start in 2023. Objectives of this project are to define the natural connectivity among different smallmouth bass populations, to describe the different behaviors exhibited by smallmouth bass in tributaries, and then lastly to evaluate the effects of moving fish during fish tournaments. The study will involve both telemetry and genetics and is scheduled to tag and release 420 fish. A portion of the study will also include tagging of fish in tributaries to Lake Erie. The next project I'll describe is focused on the movements of lake trout in and out of the Northern Refuge. The primary investigators and cooperating organizations are shown on this slide. For additional information on this project, please contact either Ted Tresca or Chuck Bronte. The purpose of this project is to evaluate the effectiveness of the northern refuge at protecting lake trout from harvest. The northern refuge is the shaded region shown in the map to the left. Project objectives are to determine whether some proportion of northern refuge lake trout leave the refuge each year and for how long, if northern refuge lake trout display a seasonal pattern in refuge residency, whether lake trout tagged in the northern refuge show a high rate of site fidelity to refuge reefs during the spawning season, and if the degree of residency differs among 4 spawning groups and is predictable based on their proximity to the refuge boundary. Receivers deployed as part of this project are shown as blue dots in the map to the left. This project is funded by the Great Lakes Fishery Commission and just got started last year. In 2021, a total of 160 lake trout were tagged and released in the refuge. The next group of projects are all taking place within Grand Traverse Bay and adjacent waters of Lake Michigan. The principal investigators for these projects and cooperating organizations and agencies are shown on this slide. For additional information on projects focused on Cisco and Lake Whitefish, please reach out to me. For additional information on the Boardman River Fish Pass Telemetry project, please contact Reed Swanson. And for additional information on the lake trout movement study in Management Zone NM5, please contact Ben Turjak. The first project in this group is focused on the movement of Cisco in Grand Traverse Bay. The particular form of Cisco that spawns in Grand Traverse Bay is believed to show high fidelity to bay habitats, yet little is known about their movements inside the bay. Therefore, the overall goal of this project is to begin to bridge the gap between Cisco form and function. In this project, Cisco were collected and tagged at 2 spawning sites, one in the eastern arm of the bay and one in the western shore of the bay. And their movements were tracked on a 38 receiver array shown in the map to the left. Project objectives were to determine if within bay movements vary seasonally or with tagging location, and whether the bathythermal habitat use varies by season. Funding for this project was provided by GLRI and GLaDOS, and the project has been ongoing since 2019. Since that time, a total of 112 Cisco have been tagged and released inside the bay. The next project in this group is focused on the large-scale movements of Lake Whitefish in Grand Traverse Bay and adjacent areas of Lake Michigan. The question addressed in this study is how well do current spatial management units for Lake Whitefish reflect the geographical organization of stocks in northeast Lake Michigan? Project objectives are to determine the geographic boundaries and spatial overlap of Lake Whitefish stocks and management units 4, 5, and 6 in Michigan waters during the fishing and non-fishing season, to determine if depth, habitat use, spawning site fidelity varies among stocks, and then whether genetic signatures of these stocks also vary. To address these objectives, we've built on the Grand Traverse Bay array shown in green in the map to the left and added the additional receiver locations in the open waters of Lake Michigan that are denoted by the red dots. Funding for this project was provided by the Great Lakes Fishery Trust, and this study just began last year. To date, 174 lake whitefish have been tagged and released at spawning sites inside of and outside of Grand Traverse Bay. The next project is using acoustic telemetry to improve our understanding of spawning habitat selection and behavior by lake whitefish. The question addressed in this study is how does lake whitefish spawning behavior and habitat selection vary with spawning area type and morphology? To address this question, we've set up positional telemetry arrays in an offshore reef located in Good Harbor Bay, Lake Michigan, in a nearshore spawning zone located in the eastern arm of Grand Traverse Bay. Project objectives are to map lake whitefish use of these spawning areas and determine if activity hotspots are associated with specific microhabitat features. And then secondly, to determine whether behavior of whitefish differs between reef and shore spawners. This study was funded by the Great Lakes Fish and Wildlife Restoration Act, administered by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and began in 2021. The fourth project in this group is using acoustic telemetry to determine connectivity between the Boardman River ecosystem, Grand Traverse Bay, and Lake Michigan in support of the Fishery Commission Fish Pass project. This project has instrumented Boardman Lake, the Boardman River estuary, which is where the Boardman River enters into the west arm of Grand Traverse Bay, shown here, and also deployed a line of receivers across the western bay between Sutton's Bay and Old Mission Peninsula. Objectives of this project, these receivers are being used to address the following objectives, which are to determine the proportion of acoustic tagged fish released into the Boardman River that are subsequently detected elsewhere in the Grand Traverse Bay and Outer Bay Lake Michigan ecosystem, to determine the extent and timing of fish movement into and out of the Boardman River, and also to identify the variables that cue the timing of fish movement into and out of the Boardman River. This project's been funded by the Great Lakes Fish Commission and will be ongoing through 2024. This project's unique in that it's tracking movements of a whole community of fish species. Species currently carrying acoustic tags include lake trout, long-nosed sucker, rainbow trout, smallmouth bass, and white sucker. The final project of this group is focused on the movements of lake trout tagged and released into management zone MM5. The goal of this project is to describe the movement, ecology, habitat use, and spawning behavior of lake trout within this management zone. Project objectives are to explore the broad-scale movement patterns and stock delineations of lake trout in MM5, to explore the fine-scale habitat selection and spawning behavior of lake trout on the Good Harbor Reef, and also to examine potential spawning interactions or interference of lake whitefish and lake trout on the Good Harbor Bay Reef. Funding for this project was provided by the National Park Service and GLRI. Like many of the other projects in this group, it started last year and will be ongoing through at least 2026. And in 2021, researchers tagged and released 35 lake trout within this management zone. And with that, I'll wrap up. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to describe these really interesting telemetry projects. If there's time remaining, I'd be happy to, either I or any of the other investigators who happen to be online would be happy to answer any of your questions. Thanks again.